Forget everything you think you know about ancient battles. Most of them, the screams, the triumphs, the very names of the champions, were swallowed by the desert. They were never meant to last. But in 1458 BC, one pharaoh wasn't fighting just for territory or gold. He was fighting for immortality. He ordered his war scribe to keep a meticulous, day-by-day journal of every action, every boast, every single chariot captured. Then he had that diary carved, not on a scroll, but on the very walls of the Temple of Karnak, hidden from public view, a secret memoir to the gods. This is the oldest detailed account of a battle in human history. It's the story of Thutmose III, the man historians call the Napoleon of Egypt. And it all begins with an insane gamble through a single-file mountain pass called Aruna, and a dark secret he was desperately trying to bury. He chose the dangerous road, not to win the battle, but to win the right to rule. If you value discovering the history the textbooks leave out, stick with us. You're about to see how greed nearly cost him everything. To understand the ferocity of Thutmose III at Megiddo, you have to look back. For years, Thutmose was the pharaoh in the shadows. He was the rightful heir, the son of Amun, but for 2 decades, a woman sat on his throne, Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut, his stepmother and aunt, was an extraordinary ruler. Her reign was one of unprecedented peace and prosperity. She built magnificent monuments, like her mortuary temple, but in doing so, she subtly undermined Thutmose's claim. She was a pharaoh who valued trade and construction over conquest. When she died, the entire geopolitical landscape held its breath. For decades, historians believed that Thutmose III, fueled by years of resentment, immediately launched a vengeful campaign, a damnatio memoriae, smashing her statues and erasing her name. But here's the lesser-known truth. Recent research suggests that while her memory was suppressed, the systematic destruction of her monuments and statues didn't happen right away, and may have been done years later by a different pharaoh. However, the initial removal of her images was a calculated political move by Thutmose, a way to ritually deactivate her divine power and ensure that a king, not a queen, was seen as the undisputed master of Egypt. He had to prove, instantly and brutally, that the age of soft power was over. The moment Hatshepsut was gone, the foreign powers, particularly the ambitious Prince of Kadesh, backed by the powerful Mitanni Empire, saw their chance. They converged on the fortified hilltop of Megiddo. This was more than a strategic strongpoint. It was the gate to the trade routes, specifically the access to vital resources, the fine Lebanese cedar wood needed for Egypt's prized chariots, and the tin required to forge bronze weapons. For Thutmose, failure at Megiddo meant becoming the puppet of a collapsing dynasty, just like during the ignoble Hyksos period generations before. This battle was his coronation, sealed in the blood of his enemies. Thutmose III was a military technocrat. He understood that his army had to be more than just a levy of conscripts. He created an elite professional fighting force, enticing men with the promise of plunder, land, and slaves. Their march itself was a feat of forgotten logistics. Imagine over 10,000 men, marching nearly 150 miles across the burning Sinai desert to Gaza. The supply lines, the water management, it was a logistical masterpiece, and the only reason they arrived fit to fight. But the true technological advantage lay in their equipment. The chariot gap. The Egyptians had perfected the light, 2-man chariot, built for speed and agility. Their Canaanite opponents, however, still relied on heavier, older 3-man models, which were slow to turn and less maneuverable on the dusty plains. This difference in design was the Bronze Age equivalent of a Ferrari versus a dump truck. The Egyptians wielded the khopesh, a curved sickle-shaped bronze blade. This weapon was a tactical marvel. Its curved tip wasn't just for slicing. It was designed to hook an enemy's shield and violently yank it away, leaving the opponent instantly exposed for the kill. The psychological effect of facing a weapon that could literally disarm you by pulling your defense away cannot be overstated. It was a tool of both physical and psychological dominance, instantly establishing the Egyptian soldier as the superior warrior. This army, armed with supreme confidence and cutting-edge weaponry, finally arrived at Yehem. Now the choice of strategy would define the fate of the entire new kingdom. At the Council of War, Thutmose's generals were unanimous. They pointed to the map, showing 2 wide, safer routes that circled the mountain range. The third way, the Aruna Pass, was a single, claustrophobic defile. only wide enough for men and horses single file. It was an obvious ambush point. The generals pleaded, and their words are recorded in the Karnak Annals. Let our victorious lord proceed on the one which is satisfactory to his heart, but do not make us go on that difficult road. This is where the story shifts from military strategy to political theater. Thutmose's decision to choose the Aruna Pass wasn't primarily a tactical masterstroke. It was an unforgettable act of political branding. He had just seized control from a woman who built temples. He had to be seen as divinely guided and fearless. By taking the suicidal path, he was making a definitive statement. I am not a hesitant bureaucrat. I am the furious son of Amun-Ra, and my will is irresistible. He famously rebuked them. Will not the wretched foe say, His Majesty has gone on another road because he has become fearful of us? So the army entered the throat of Aruna. The chariots were broken down, carried by porters. The massive army was reduced to a vulnerable single-file line, a snake easily decapitated. For hours they poured through the defile. Every man must have felt the cold sweat of vulnerability, expecting the rain of arrows at any moment. But the ambush never came. The Prince of Kadesh and his allies had made a catastrophic assumption. They were so certain that no sane pharaoh would risk his entire army on a cattle track that they deployed their forces to guard the two easy roads. Thutmose had outmaneuvered them, not by brilliant subtlety, but by sheer audacious insanity. When the Egyptian army finally streamed onto the plain near Megiddo, the enemy was caught totally off guard, scrambling to pull back to the city walls as daylight faded. Thutmose had won the strategic victory before the first arrow was even fired. The battle itself, fought at dawn, was a brutal, one-sided affair. Thutmose, leading from the center in his electrum chariot, launched a ferocious attack. The Canaanites, disorganized and on the back foot, broke immediately. The Egyptian advantage in mobility and the sheer psychological terror of the Kopesh was overwhelming. The annals simply state, My Majesty attacked them and they fled, falling in heaps. Victory was absolute. The city gates of Megiddo lay open, the enemy routed. Thutmose had only to order the final push and the war would have ended in a single day. But then, disaster struck, recorded in the annals as the ultimate act of folly. The disciplined Egyptian army became a mob. Instead of pursuing the fleeing enemy, their hearts were possessed by greed. They fell upon the field, picking apart the colossal spoils, 924 captured chariots, some inlaid with gold, the royal tent of the Prince of Kadesh, and vast piles of jewelry. While the invincible Egyptian army was literally stuffing their pockets with plunder, the Prince of Kadesh and the other leaders of the coalition, stripped of their horses, reached the closed gates of Megiddo. The defenders frantically lowered ropes made of tied-together garments, pulling their leaders up to safety over the massive walls. The greatest victory in Egyptian history was immediately sabotaged by human avarice. The city that was worth 1,000 cities was still held by the enemy. Thutmose III, standing amidst the piles of gold and bodies, must have felt a cold fury. He gave a new, chilling command. They would not storm the walls. They would starve the city. For 7 long months, the Egyptians laid siege, building a ditch and a towering wooden wall around Megiddo, which they named Menkapera Encircler of Asiatics. Megiddo eventually surrendered. The final act was a theatrical humiliation. Thutmose seized all the enemy's horses, forcing the defeated princes to ride home on donkeys. A clear, devastating message of their new subservient status. But the true genius of Thutmose III began after Megiddo. He learned his lesson. He realized that a true empire requires relentless maintenance. The Megiddo campaign was merely the first of 17 military campaigns over the next 2 decades. He earned the moniker, the Napoleon of Egypt, by mastering rapid deployment, building the first great Egyptian navy to strike coastal targets, and using pontoon boats to cross the mighty Euphrates and strike deep into Mitanni territory. He extended the Egyptian empire to its greatest territorial reach. He didn't just conquer, he organized. He brought the sons of conquered foreign princes back to Egypt to be educated in the Egyptian court, ensuring that when they returned home, they would be loyal vassals. He perfected the art of imperial administration. The most extraordinary part of his legacy is the documentation itself. The Annals of Karnak are the proof. They were not vague poems of glory. They were taken from the daily war journal, a meticulous accounting of every captured animal, every sack of grain, and every prisoner. Thutmose III literally wrote his own history with the precision of a field accountant. He was waging a war on forgetting, using the indelible power of stone to ensure that his single, daring act at Aruna, and the subsequent building of his empire, would outlast the fragile memory of man. Thutmose III ascended to the heavens after 54 years on the throne, his dynasty secured, his power unquestioned. Those annals, etched into the heart of Karnak, are more than historical record. They are a monument to the first man who understood that control of the narrative is the ultimate power. He achieved his goal. We remember the names and the exploits. If this deep dive into the political theater and forgotten secrets of the Bronze Age kept you watching, help us keep these epic stories alive. Hit that like button, subscribe, and tell us in the comments. If you were Thutmose, would you have chosen the dangerous Aruna Pass? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next forgotten chapter of history.